Welcome to the Planners on Purpose podcast. I'm Naomi Tucker, your host, and I'm very excited to have with me today Melva LaJoy Legrand. We'll be talking about event preparedness and a few other great topics. But before Melva jumps in, I want to tell you a little bit about her. So, Melva is an award-winning producer, event producer, and she's the CEO and founder of a DC-based event planning firm called LaJoy Plans. She's also a nationally recognized public speaker and a creative director, also a writer and a community leader dedicated to missions rooted in race and gender equality,
Mm.
as well as higher education. So I'm very excited to have Melva here on the Planners on Purpose podcast. Melva, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, and hi to everyone who will be listening and watching.
Yes, hello, everyone. Melva, your background is so intricate. You have so much experience in the event world, and I am just excited to talk to you. And I feel like we don't know where to start, but what I would love to do is give our listeners just a brief overview of who you are and how did you come to be as nationally recognized as you are today. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
So, thank you for the question. And again, thank you for having me. I always like to say, or I try to say, that I am the result of my ancestors' prayers. So, I am Melvin's. That's how I got the name Melva. I am Melvin's daughter. I am Emmanuel's wife. And on my best day, I am a servant, a storyteller, and a survivor who uses events as my medium.
Mm.
And so, in terms of the events and hospitality space, I always like to tell people that events and I fell in love over 20 years ago. I was working a completely different career in education and didn't feel like that was my authentic space. And so I made the transition into events management via production. And after some time in production, really made the shift into nonprofit events, or what I now call mission focused or mission forward events. And that was over 20 years ago.
Wow. That's great. I love that, by the way. Just like the servant. I love how you just came to be. This is so great. And how did LaJoy form from there?
So it's a credit. A lot of what I do is a credit to my parents. So I already mentioned my late father. My name is the gift that he gave me, Melvin Melva. The LaJoy is my middle name. And I tell people it's not because I'm that important or so great. I'm great at a lot of things, but that's not the reason. The reason is my middle name is a direct result that my parents, who were married in love for 54 years, very much wanted a big family. And it wasn't possible for them. And so when I was born, I'm their only child. They said I was the love and joy, the joy of their life.
Oh,
And
that's
so
so
when I made the shift to do this work and to build this business, I said, and it's still true, it's the love and joy, the la joy of my professional life. And that's why it's LaJoy Plans.
oh, I think that's beautiful. That's so beautiful.
Thank
So
you.
when you moved from production to event, are you still in event production or now you're just event planning? Or is both?
So, it is definitely both. I'm thankful that back then, I would argue, I don't know if this is statistically true, but there weren't, to my eye, a lot of women in production. There weren't, to my eye, a lot of people of color in production. And so my approach to events management is definitely a producer's eye. I'm looking for the innovative, I'm looking to create experience that emote, that galvanize people for our mission forward clients. So it's a fusion of both for sure.
Hmm. Now, did you always have that intention with your business, or did you have a little bit of a journey to get to that?
Well, I think if people are being honest, my intention was to pay my bills. My intention was to pay my bills. And I think sometimes the beauty of life, if you allow it to, is that your passion, your purpose, whatever you're meant to do finds you. It has a way of coming together. And so while the initial intention was to pay my bills, I found myself in circles with organizations and with people that were doing such incredible work. So this feel good work was paying my bills.
Mm.
And then once the dust settled, you have your footing. I made a decision because you could be exclusively luxury or exclusively wedding or exclusively all of these things. And it's very simple. I want to do the work, I want to use the artistry of events to support these mission forward organizations. And now I lead with that.
Mm.
Absolutely.
That's great. I love what you said. You want to be able to love what you do and do it in a place that you also are passionate about. How how can event planners that maybe are looking to do transitions right now, how would you suggest they do that and be more intentional about where their career is going?
So I think a couple of things. I think if you're an emerging professional, what I'm going to tell you to do is to do everything. Because unless you do everything, you actually don't know what you like and what you don't like. And when you get the indicator that you have, and how do you get the indicator? You know that you're in your right assignment when it is challenging but equally rewarding. Where for you, there is stress. Everybody knows our industry is stressful, but the stress settles. I actually just wrote about this, and you still are delighted by the work. You don't resent the work.
Mm.
But the only way to do that is to humble yourself and do everything. I did everything. So I am very clear on the things that I enjoy. I am very clear on the things that I can do, but aren't in alignment with my purpose. But you've got to start as a beginner. And I think sometimes we're scared to be a beginner, but be a
Mhm.
beginner. You got to be a
Mhm.
beginner.
Yeah. You're so right. I sit on a advisory board for a technical college in the event management program, and we always talk about some of the planners that are coming in, and a lot of them aren't wanting to be beginners. It's like we want to jump to a different level than where we are. And I think that you just express how important it is for you to be a beginner because there's a lot of golden nuggets in being a beginner and just figuring out where you need to go or are led to go in this particular industry.
Oh, absolutely. And here's the thing, I get the desire to jump because the perception in social media has not helped with this. The jump means greater responsibility, greater recognition, more money, etc. However, I would argue that the things that happen when you jump too quickly also means burnout,
Mm.
also means missteps. And so if you don't build when you get to wherever you think it is that you're supposed to be or you feel entitled to, I have found that you won't last long because you have no building blocks. You have no foundation. All you have is what you think is going to happen when you get there. A lot of people want to be managers and then they realize, oh, I've got to manage a lot of personalities. A lot of people want to be business owners and then they realize, oh, taxes. So
Yep.
I get the desire to jump, but I would caution anyone to not allow yourself to build over time. And also, if I can add, stop comparing yourself to how quickly someone else is building. It took me a long time to get where I'm going. I always tell the story of how I was always the bridesmaid, never the bride, right? Well, it can happen in work.
Mhm.
You got to build your way.
Yeah, it's like don't compare your 1 year to someone else's 10th year, right?
Mhm.
So, absolutely. Yeah, so I love that. We're just talking about some good intentions that we can put in our careers, but I think that you're really intentional about your business and how your business tracked over the years. How can event professionals just set good intentions and how they plan? I would love to hear from you on that.
So I think a couple of things. I think I want to give a credit to a friend who said to me, less force, more flow. And I think businesses have a natural ebb and flow, but sometimes it goes back to that jumping. We want to be a business who has more likes on Instagram, or we want to be this, or we want to be that. I think number one, what I would say to a business owner is get very clear about your value proposition and get comfortable with it. Don't attach it to external confirmation or affirmation. For me, the barometer is my profit and loss sheet. I don't have a lot of followers on Instagram. I don't even know how to get into my Facebook, but I'm very clear on my profit and loss sheet, and a business actually needs business. So I would say definitely get crystal clear about your value proposition, about your values, who you are going to be in the work, and align yourself with individuals and creative partners who can confidently and comfortably carry that vision forward.
Mhm. And network with them, right? And connect with those individuals. And I feel like even just use all of the spaces, right? The event planning spaces. We talked about IMEX before
Yeah.
this call, just using those opportunities to connect with people that are going to help you along your journey.
Yeah, and I think also, and I love that you brought up IMEX because that's a great example. PCMA, MPI. We could name all of the
Mhm.
letters in the alphabet, and I think the advice I would give is be in the relationship business versus in the transaction business.
Mhm.
Because I think in the relationship business, sometimes we want things so quick, but you need to take the time to really get to know people versus automatically asking for the favor or the quid pro quo.
Mhm.
I think that's critical. Critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And I I can't tell you how many times my inbox is filled with the quid pro quo. Hey, can I get this for that? And the relationship and foundation isn't there. And when you look at the business that you do give or you have the opportunity to work with others on, it really is led by the relationship that you have.
Everything is relationship. Well, most things are relationships. And I also would say it's relationships with others and it's for the relationship with yourself. So I think your authenticity, rather than trying to be a carbon copy of a business you admire, which is, it's great to admire businesses,
Mhm.
but you got to be your authentic self, and you've got to lead in this relationship work, this networking work, as you are, not as a manufactured version that you think is going to get the desired result. Because here's the thing, when you show up as a representative or the manufactured version, you've actually got to keep that up. So it's easier
Hard
to
to do
just
that.
show up as yourself and build a relationship from what your reality is.
Mm. Yeah, I really like that. I really like that. I mean, and it's absolutely true. It's going to be hard to sustain it when you're just trying to keep up with the Joneses or keep up with the next company or what you
Yes,
think should be you, but it can
yes,
be pretty easy to just be authentic, your authentic self and just lead from there. And people are attracted to it as well.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. So I wanted to pivot a little bit and just talk about the intentions that we take with being prepared for events because I know that's something that you're passionate about, and especially with the state of the world, there's something going on every single day. How can event professionals be more intentional in how we prepare our attendees, our events for just the unexpected?
Well, and thank you for that question. And let me, to anyone listening or watching, acknowledge what you just said, that the world is in a place of divisiveness and conflict. And what I believe to be true is that events are gathering of people, right? So if people are in conflict or have concerns, it is perfectly reasonable that that would show up at an event, and you need to consider it. So, the first thing I want to tell all of my colleagues to do is you need to be proactive. So, the same way that we journey map and we consider our nursing mothers, or we consider someone with a language barrier, or et cetera, unfortunately, we need to be talking about their overall safety and wellness. So, what might that look like? That may look like creating, I just heard about this today, an introvert lounge, where
Mm.
it's a dedicated space where introverts, individuals who have that identity, can walk in and not have to talk. It could mean taking a meditative moment, depending on the nature of the organization, to acknowledge what's in the room, not in a faith forward way, but allowing people to calm themselves, be present, etc., because there is so much happening globally. And then, of course, it does need to mean, what is your preparedness? And my heart goes out to Maine, and it's not just Maine. What does it mean if there's an active shooter situation? And what I'm finding is that our hotel partners, venue partners, have a preparedness guide. And so it would behoove anyone, if you are reading the news, unfortunately, you can't unsee what's happening. But you may not be able to control it. Actually, none of us can control it, but you can prepare to the best of your ability. And the last one I would offer, as someone who's actually had to use this skill, is who on your team is CPR certified?
Mhm.
I didn't think I would ever have to use that. And it was the byproduct of a mentor saying to me many years ago, I want the entire team certified. And so I've kept up my certification. I need to do a better job with my team. But my larger point here is, if it's impacting people, assume it can impact your events. And your question as a planner, or your challenge in the Mission Impossible speak, is, how are you being proactive and supporting the full range of your guests and attendees experience?
Yeah, absolutely. You said just so much there to just think about, and we are in some way we are responsible for how that goes, or at least to be as much as prepared as we can. And you mentioned that some hotels and providers, they do have, like, say, their emergency response plan. And I think also it's nice to just, I guess, have 2 plans. Have yours going into it, and you all compile and collaborate to make sure that it's one cohesive plan, so that they're aware of things on your end that you need, and you're aware of, kind of certain go-to points that they have. But definitely be prepared as much as possible. And I love the CPR certification. I too have a CPR
Ah,
certification. And, just or have even been a part of different organizations that just require having that for their team, especially their meetings and events team. So that's definitely a good thing to have, because you never know when you can use it.
and I've used it. So I won't say when, but I'm glad I had the recall, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how can event professionals, when it comes to uncertainty, have you found that there's a certain types of ways in which event professionals can respond to these things? Let's say you're on site, something happens. The next step would be what?
I think the next step is the step beforehand. I think
Mhm,
that event planners in general, everybody excels at something or
mhm,
one thing. Not everybody excels at risk management. And so I think, and that's not a bad or a good thing, that is just a truth. And so I think walking in the door, we need to know who is the one. So if something should happen, and let me say, if it is something that involves security threat, I am on the side that you let the security professionals, the police, etc., handle that. But if we're talking about something more logistical forward, I think it is the clearest way to handle it is reporting it to whoever is the lead of the risk management that is logistics forward. They obviously should have a protocol of how they resolve that, documenting it after the fact to inform the client or organization. And the critical piece that I feel very strongly with is checking in with your team, because sometimes these logistical forward risk exposures can be triggering. We already know we're highly stressed. We already know it's fast paced. We already know that despite our best intentions, we may not be able to communicate with the generosity of the word. Like sometimes it is curt and fast. And so when the dust settles and we've resolved the uncertainty of the moment, I think it is perfectly normal to ask the question, how did we do? How are you? What can we do differently? And keep that cycle of learning ongoing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Wanted to also just talk about cultural. There could be some cultural cues or even global cues when it comes to planning your event, right? Just making sure that we're keeping an eye out for what's happening in the rest of the world if you have attendees traveling to a certain destination or not. Any advice around that?
Yeah, this is something that I'm getting better at, particularly this year. So, this year, at the prodding of my team, and I'm so grateful for them, I've implemented this know before you go protocol where I talk about who the client is, their relationship to LaJoy, what their priorities are. But something I've been considering for our 2024 season, and we have to make time for it, is populating some articles of interest. Because I lead our commercial work, our script writing work, I read obsessively about our clients so that I know their language. But I realize that the growth opportunity for me is not at the same level, but providing some, for lack of a better term, cheat sheets
Mhm.
for my team so that they have the nomenclature, so that they have a more robust lay of the land that gives them confidence when naturally you're going to have small talk with the client. It's inevitable. It's inevitable. So that's what I would say. And for in summary, what I would say to that point is read your clients at minimum mission vision. At minimum, at least know that. And if you can go to some the quickest reads are usually the blogs.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's great. I know with working with corporate events a lot, many corporate clients also have their avenues of security, right? And being able to detect or have their fillers out for what's happening globally or locally or wherever you're having your events. So that also could be a good resource for event professionals. Like you said, looking at your clients, seeing what their language is, but they probably already have a team that's also working on that and collaborating with them too could be a really good way to be prepared.
Well, and the other thing I realized I talked about more of a literature review to knowing them and their culture. With the
Hmm.
preparedness, something that I introduced this year is we do for certain clients, because not everything would warrant this, have a security liaison. Because guess what? I'm not. I am not an ex police officer. I am a lot of things.
Hmm.
And it occurred to me, and I think we're seeing post COVID, just like how you had COVID task force, I definitely think as a business model, not for me, but for retirees, I am seeing security consultants. And so if you are doing a convention on a hot topic and there's something in the thread, I think it is worth the investment, just how clients hire us for our expertise in logistical management. Why wouldn't you hire someone to help you do, for not every event, but for certain events, a security assessment? And there are businesses out there, obviously, everyone has to do their own research,
Hmm.
that could help you with that need.
Yeah. Absolutely, and they're popping up, right, all over the place, just these smaller maybe there are larger companies, but I've seen more of the smaller companies that, like you mentioned, are those retired police officers
Yep.
or even agents that really want to continue to do this work and help, and they are excited when they get a chance to be able to show what they can do for events. So that's an excellent resource.
Absolutely.
So, can you tell us about a time where I know you said that you had to use CPR on someone, but perhaps tell us about a time that you had an unexpected situation that you feel like you were prepared and any insights that you perhaps gleaned from that experience?
Sure. The example that I often talk about is there was a CEO. This is in the United States. I won't say the state to not out them, but the CEO of this particular organization was delivering a keynote. We knew that they had some pre-existing health conditions. They were struggling to deliver the keynote in terms of their verbal articulation. Um, Long story short, I had someone on my team who, outside of my CPR certification, they had a medical background as well. And ultimately, that individual sadly collapsed on stage.
Mm,
Now, because of my limited training, because the other person was much more trained as a former, I want to use the term right, EMT, we had talked about this in advance, knowing that this could be a possibility. I should say we also cautioned the individual to not speak. And so we modified, they were to speak for, if I remember correctly, 20 minutes and it was 10 minutes, but it was still too much. We were able to quickly and swiftly secure that individual from a health perspective, get them the treatment that they needed, but also from a logistics forward, because we had some historical knowledge, we were able to move. I had already created a plan B of the program. So their colleagues were waiting in the wing to kind of take over. There wasn't a big acknowledgement of it because that's very personal and private. There was an acknowledgement. There was a brief pause. The program continued. I was not there. And then that individual got the support that they needed. And then afterwards, because of the nature of the organization, what that senior leader opted to do is provide some on site counseling because of how they passed out and what happened. It was a bit jarring. And that's the situation there. The learning for me is critical. The learning is this: having those conversations with your client in advance and being trusted to operate with a certain level of discretion. Also, having, if you know in advance of a medical challenge, if you have any indication, having a professional to be your thought partner or be physically present, and then having a plan for how will you care for people if the worst case scenario comes to pass.
mm, yeah, absolutely. And it's ugh, I'm sorry that that happened, and I feel like it's a scary situation too, right? Just to have that happen, on site, and you have to really put your feelings aside sometimes to be able to react appropriately. Can you talk about that? Just the feelings that you have and the overwhelm that might set in and how you were able to push through that?
Well, I want to say that I think it's different for everyone. I
Mhm,
think that, as I mentioned, I did the process of building blocks over a long time. And I want to give credit to mentors over the years that showed me how to be empathetic, but also firm.
mm,
For me, it is truly about compartmentalization, if I can say that word correctly, in the moment, but not exclusively. So, in the moment, one of the things that I am good at is the reaction, like I knew, okay, this is happening, etc. However, the more important part is if you opt to be someone who blocks out and focuses, you have to have your decompression time. So,
mm,
what I have learned over the years is I cannot be in a risk situation or a high stress environment if I do not take the decompression and I have a decompression ritual. And so, my advice to folks is to assess for yourself what is your tolerance for stress and be really honest. Be really honest because there are a lot of people who are trudging through and trying to do this work, and there is nothing of themselves left. That may mean this is not the best environment for you. But once you decide what your tolerance is for stress, the immediate next step is to develop your decompression ritual. Mine is a combination of a lot of things, but every planner who is hearing this, you've got to have a decompression ritual. Otherwise, I believe you will burn out.
Yep. Absolutely, and we talk about burnout a lot on on this show, and I think that that's absolutely key. Have a decompression ritual. Have something that feels good to you. Things that are going to refresh you and re-energize you, so that you can go on and continue to serve at a high capacity because that's what we do.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. That's exactly right.
Absolutely. So I know we talked about like the planning and being prepared for planning, maybe even the response time, but let's talk about planning for financial when it comes to these types of situations. How do we plan financially for the unexpected? How do you do that with the events that you have?
So I've been living by the same principle since probably 2007. And it is this: every single event budget. Now, people may choose to not do this, but I give the same advice, should have a 10% miscellaneous fund. Every single one. Now, there are a variety of reasons why people would choose differently, but I feel strongly about that. In the instance that you're like, no, I don't want to do that, I do need my clients to at least consider or have the conversation about event insurance.
Mhm.
Um, so those are the two things I feel very strongly about.
Yeah, I agree with both of those. And sometimes you have to beg and barter to make sure that that stays within the budget, but it's definitely it comes useful because there's a lot of unexpected. There's a lot of unseen circumstances that come about with planning events. So being prepared for them is very helpful. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Now, is there any, I guess, around preparedness, is there anything else that you wanted to share with the planners that are here about just responding and being able to manage those unexpected situations? I know you talked about active shooters. We've recently seen hostage situations that kind of came out of certain events where people were gathered. Well, any other advice that you would like to give event professionals to help mentally prepare for those types of things?
Well, I think I want to summarize three things that are coming up for me now that you said the question again.
Mhm.
Number one, I want my beloved planning community to not take this on by themselves. I think it is critical to have community, to have collaborators who have expertise, like the security professionals, and to build from that place. I think sometimes planners are characterized as the do all can do. And this is something that requires thoughtful collaboration. One. Number two, I think it is non negotiable to prioritize your mental health as a way of being. And I think that if you find yourself in a situation where the work you're starting to resent, or it doesn't connect with your values, or you have any indicator that you are not safe in this environment, and this is speaking for someone who did this, but you need the money, but you're worried about this, I would say worry about none of that and remove yourself from that situation and watch how life will provide for you. That's the second thing. And the
Mhm.
third thing I would say in the spirit of preparedness is just to be true to the word. You have to prepare. It is not something It is not something that can be an afterthought. I think there's a gazillion case studies of the folks who said, "Gosh, I wish we would have. Why didn't we?" You have to prepare, and not prepare in a way that is paranoid, but prepare in a way that's proactive. Because I think every planner listening and watching this knows the moments that you did not prepare for, this is a fact, are the most painful.
Mhm.
That's what
Absolutely.
I'd say.
Yeah, you said a word. It but that it all was very, very good. I really appreciate that. It's just prepare, prepare, prepare as much as possible when you're on site. Be prepared for what you did not prepare for. So, and react accordingly. And I love just continuing to have those partners. They can help just share that, I guess, stress, or just share the responsibility of making sure that things are planned for and prepared for well, and trust in your team too. There's so many people that bring the events together, so just trusting them and sharing that with them is very
Yes.
helpful. Hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. So around, I know we talked about mental health a few times, and I feel like it's a subject that we can continue to talk about. But there's a lot of common misconceptions, I guess, that planners may have around mental health. And you did tap on to a little bit of it before, is like when you're feeling that you're down, when you're feeling that you're getting stressed, to really step away. But sometimes I feel like there is not an out for event professionals, or they don't see the out. What are some misconceptions that you have seen over the years, or just some more suggestions on managing mental health while managing events? And there's so many ways that this can go. We have our the client's expectations, right, to contend with, and then just the vendor partners that we work on. There's so many areas that stress can come on an event professional.
So I think what I'm inclined to say, I want to first acknowledge anyone who's listening and watching who may share my survivor identity. I am a multi survivor of abuse, and I am a lifelong, not lifelong, but my adult life advocate for therapy. And so what I'm about to say is just from that space, but definitely not from a medical perspective. I do feel strongly that if this work, and I know this is for planners, but if this work is costing you yourself, then you need first and foremost to find other work. That I feel strongly about. Secondly, I think, and I am definitely not perfect at this. I still work late nights. I still do weekends. We even, as a protocol for certain events, go into an on-call scenario.
Mhm.
But what I try to tell people is you've got to focus on your endpoint. So for me, and your endpoint should have a celebration, even if it wasn't perfect. So for us, we just went through an insane October, and I don't use that as insane in a bad way. October 3rd, I left in October, Saturday, whatever that date is when we finished. And it was nonstop and it was consecutive.
Mm.
But after that, prior to, I had already planned the ways in which I was going to celebrate myself. The third thing I would say, and I have five, though I'll be brief, is you need to have an accountability buddy. You need to have a safe space. Now, my immediate safe space for me is obviously my husband, obviously, but I think you need to have an industry safe space.
Mhm.
And I would say that has to be someone who's not your colleague because they can't see the situation outside of the situation, but someone in the industry. The fourth thing I would say is, and we just sent out an email today, is you need to communicate to clients what your boundaries are as a business. So for this business, as the clients just learned today, we are closed. Not like if you text me, I'll answer, like closed December 18th through January 8th.
Mm.
In December, we only will work Monday through Thursday, 10 to 4, and on Fridays, we are closed. So I think you need to set some standards. And then the fifth thing is, I think you have to laugh.
Mhm.
I think sometimes if we look at the larger world, and if someone is so upset, I'll never forget a man was so upset because the buffet was not out. He was yelling, spitting, all of the things in my face. You kind of have to laugh and you have to think to yourself, this has nothing to do with me and everything to do with him and his stuff, and laugh. Because some of it, I'm not saying now, some things not funny, but that the reaction to no air, like the little chicken wing, that's hilarious. That is truly hilarious. Not when we can see kids surviving war or you're at a conference for climate change, but the thing that you are up in arms about is your chicken wing.
Mm.
It's hilarious. Put it in perspective.
Exactly. And it's their perception of whatever. And it's not necessarily something that you have to absorb, like you're saying, you know, take it lightly, see what you can do to action it and just keep on keep on moving.
Well, and I love what you say. I always tell people, and they don't believe me, I don't take on stuff that's not mine. I choose my
Exactly.
stuff.
That's yours.
I chose my husband, so yeah, I got to take all of his stuff. And
Mhm,
I don't mean that in a negative way. My parents and being a caregiver to my dad before he died, I
mhm,
chose that. But like your fit over something, I don't have to choose that.
mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So that's some very key points and I just hope everyone took note of that. Those are some just amazing points and they're practical. They're practical, but applying them is something that you have to work really hard to do. And you have to defend that. I feel like, you have to put in action, but then at times you might have to defend your boundaries that you're setting for yourself. But boundaries to me create freedom for you. So you have to make sure you're keeping those boundaries.
Well, I agree with you because here's what I know to be true. People say, "Oh, I want people to be happy." But they resent people who choose peace. They want you to meet them at their level of anxiety or their level of, "But I choose peace." And that is
Mhm.
hard for people.
Yep, absolutely. Especially when you're responding, right, to a crisis or something. You're keeping your cool. You're trying to operate in a particular space of like peace and actioning things and getting things done and moving along. But some people can't, they don't react like this gentleman with the chicken wing. He had to react in the way that he did and probably was upset because maybe you aren't reacting in the same way that he he was. So making sure that you, yeah, protect your peace too is
You don't
important.
have to match people's energy. Your
Exactly.
energy is not what is not a part of the preparedness plan is your energy. That came in the door before.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's not up for
Absolutely.
debate.
Exactly. I love that. I love that. Any other, I guess, insights just around, I mean, we talked about mental health, we talked about preparedness. Anything else that you would like to share with our listeners?
I think as a closing thought, I would just say do what you love and lean into that. And that which you don't love, because I don't think it's we don't get to do everything we love every single day, all of the time, but it should be that there's more light than dark. And if your scale is imbalanced, the work, like since it's planners on purpose, the work of finding your purpose is balancing the scale. So if you're hearing this conversation and you realize you're imbalanced, the best thing you can do before you do your event preparedness plan is to balance your scale to make sure you're working in alignment with your purpose. The rest then happens after that
Mhm.
because you're operating from a clean slate.
Yeah. Lots of gems dropped, Melva. Thank you. Thank you so much. Um, I have a few questions for you. This is just to kind of break it up a bit, but it's just three surprise questions in it. Hopefully, will allow us to get to know you a little bit better. Are you
Sure.
okay with answering these questions?
I am who I am. Let's do
All
it.
right. Okay. So I've learned that I guess, do you live in Paris or are you traveling to Paris often now?
My name is well, the French name is Melva LaJoy,
Hmm.
and I DC raised me. I married a Frenchman born in Paris, and so we strive to do both.
Okay, great. So what's your favorite thing to do, like a free time to do in Paris when you are there?
I have a top 3, and that is every morning, my husband and I go to our neighborhood bistro for our cafe or café allongé, which is an Americano or an espresso. I enjoy the range, and I mean, it is massive, of art that you can see in the various museums. It's hard to describe in words, and I'm not talking about the Louvre, which is fantastic, or the Orsay. I'm talking about the art that is Paris.
Hmm.
And the third thing I would say is someone who immersed themselves in the culture as a gift to my husband is I never thought I'd say this. I actually love now speaking French
Oh,
because
really?
I worked so hard at it and because it is a daily or minute by minute gift that I give to my husband and his family because
Mm.
he at least speaks English. And so I feel like I'm living out my purpose as a wife to fully immerse myself in his culture.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's amazing. I love those things. You have some amazing things to do there. Yeah, so
As
amazing.
we would say,
Yeah.
pas mal, which in French means not bad, pas mal.
Not bad. I love it. So, let's go to the second one. So, what is your favorite, your professional development book, a book that you would recommend to event professionals
Oh, oh, to event professionals because I read a lot outside
or
of.
yeah, anything, just any professional development book?
So I would say I think reading biographies of people that interest you for me has been tremendous. So on my reading list now is Kerry Washington's book, which I think is Thicker Than Water. And I read that not because I'm going to be an actress, but I'm interested in these are her words, not my words, and how people have chosen to become the heroes of their story.
Mm,
And apparently, her book is phenomenal. So I think biographies are very, very interesting. The
mhm.
event book that comes to mind, I'm sitting here thinking, and I'm also looking at all of these books. I recall, and it's been some time, but the Art of Gathering.
Mhm.
I'm looking
Yeah.
at it like I can't tell you a specific quote right now, but I recall liking that book.
Mhm. That was a good book. We had that in our book club maybe last year, and really enjoyed reading that book. I love the way the author just wrote it. I feel like her writing was art with with writing that book too. So that's great. Now, in your travels, what do you take with you? What is something that you take with you when you're en route to your destination? It's one of those must-have things. You're getting on the plane. You have to make sure you have this thing.
I have to have my journal. I've been journaling since the age of 7, and I can't it is my story to myself.
Mm,
And it's how I remind myself how far I've come, what I was curious about. It is my love letter.
mm. I love that. My daughter loves journaling too. So journaling is awesome. I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much, Melva. I just really appreciate you being on this podcast. This was a great conversation, and I just loved everything that you had to give us today. I appreciate you.
Well, thank you for having me and forgive me. I'm so parched. That's why I keep drinking water.
You're good. You're good. Before we before we officially let go, why don't you let everyone know where to find you if they would like to connect or just to connect with your company?
The best place to be in community with me is LinkedIn at Melva LaJoy Legrand on LinkedIn. That's the best way to be in community with me.
Perfect. All right. Well, again, thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for being here on the Planners on the Purpose podcast. Until next time, stay on purpose.